Today we have our mom with us. Hey, Mom, when was the closest any of us almost died?
Well, you were pretty healthy kids, and nobody stayed overnight in the hospital until Lucas, the
Mm,
youngest.
Mm.
And he had a stomach ache and he had a fever, and we looked at the symptoms and we were pretty sure he had appendicitis. So
ah,
we kind of diagnosed it, and the only thing, and it was a pretty common surgery. So we just had to get him to the hospital, have them diagnose us, do the surgery. It's pretty cut and dried. So even though he was sick, we were not too worried.
yeah, appendicitis is the only thing that killed someone on the Lewis and Clark expedition.
Did William Floyd. How old was Lucas when that happened?
I think he was about 12.
12. Hey, 12-year-old who is sick and not well. That's like our text today. Here we go. Welcome back to Help I'm Teaching Sunday School. Here once again with Paul, my brother. And today we are so glad to have our mom, Dawn, along with us. Mom, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for asking me.
And we are glad to have you, not only because you're our mom, but because you have more experience teaching Sunday school than we do. And not only teaching Sunday school, but also teaching preschool and fourth grade and all kinds of other things in Lutheran schools. And so we are glad to have you with us here today too.
Well, thank you for asking me.
The only question I have is, if Mom's on it this week, who's going to watch it?
I'll watch myself. I'll watch all of us together.
We have determined that Mom watches this and is one of our very faithful viewers. So we're glad to have you with us here doing this today. We're taking a look at Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through 43, where Jesus does two miracles here too. And we should just mention that the Sunday school lesson for this focuses on one of these, Mark 5, 21 to 24, and then 35 to 43, which is Jesus raising Jairus' daughter. We figured since we were going through this, it would be good for us to also pick up the section that happens in the middle where Jesus heals somebody else on the way to doing a miracle. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to make sure we got that one in there because we think there's actually some really important stuff that happened as Jesus heals this woman here, in addition to raising Jairus' daughter from the dead. Let's go ahead and get going. We're going to do this in chunks today rather than verse by verse, just because it is a little bit of a longer passage for us to get through. So we're going to start with the first three verses, verses 21 to 23. And Paul, would you get us going?
Yeah, sure. Starting 21. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." So remember last week they were going away from the crowds across the sea. Now they're coming back, and they get there, and some context here. So they're in Capernaum, probably, right, or thereabout. And so they're in Galilee, which is in the north. Jerusalem is down in the south, where the temple is. So the people who live in that area, they would go down to the temple a few times a year for the big celebrations. It's probably a week-long journey or so. But for your weekly worship, that was found in the synagogue. So think of more like our regular churches, kind of that idea in a regular congregation. And this guy is called the ruler of the synagogue. But I think that means more like one of the guys kind of in charge of it, an elder or so.
Would probably be the closest thing to something we would have today. They kind of, had the elders, and then you would kind of rotate a lot of places between your elders who gets to preach that day, unless you have somebody like Jesus who comes and then preaches and is a teacher. Yeah.
And the focus you can see still here is everybody wants to be healed by Jesus. He couldn't even eat in his house that one time. Everyone's pressing up against him. Everyone wants to be healed by Jesus. It's something that he's doing for people. They want that probably more than they want to listen to him sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. And so Jesus is really at this point in the narrative of Mark kind of forcing this question of, it's the question that we had last time, where the disciples in the boat ask after he stills the storm, who then is this? Where Jesus has just shown that, okay, here I am. I'm the one who can control the weather, make the storm stop. And then in the passage that happens between these two, between the stilling of the storm and these two miracles, Jesus casts demons out of a guy, a whole bunch of them. And so you can see, okay, Jesus has the power over nature. Jesus has the power over the forces of evil. And now here's Jesus going to square off with death for the first time too.
The Concordia commentator, Volz, who wrote the first installment of the Mark commentary, said that when the ruler asked Jesus to heal his daughter, he wasn't asking Jesus as a medical person who was going to come and give some kind of potion or something, but was looking for a spiritual healer that would lay hands on, and that's how the healing would be done.
Yeah, and so he has faith in Jesus, that Jesus is actually able to do this, right? That here this little girl is about to die, and Jesus is able to do this. He's got faith already in that. All right, well, that's great. Let's go on to the second part here that happens, and this is the part that kind of happens between the two little sections of the story. So verse 24 through 28. And he went with him, and a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. So here you've got this woman who has this flow of blood. So, I mean, she's weak. She's probably anemic for sure. On top of that, she has spent all of her money trying to get better, and it hasn't worked. Instead, she's getting worse. This bleeding issue makes her unclean. So she can't go to the temple. She can't really be around people. I mean, it's a lonely life, like the life that the lepers live, and she's kind of an outcast for this. But she's heard about Jesus and knows that Jesus heals people, and this is something we've been seeing through this, that people hear about Jesus or they hear from Jesus, and that message about Jesus creates faith. Jesus' word creates faith, and so she believes that if I just go up and just touch the edge of his clothes, that's enough. I'll be healed.
Yeah, you wonder if other people had done that. Everyone's always pressed around him. You wonder if someone said, "Yeah, but I got healed by just touching him." Maybe that, and talking about her isolation, her husband is absent from this narrative. Did he give up on her too after 12 years of uncleanliness? Who knows? But that's something that that's an omission that stands out to me too.
What impressed me was she didn't want to bother Jesus. She wanted to be healed, but she didn't want to bother him. She didn't think she was important enough to ask herself, "Jesus, please come, or please heal me." She didn't want to bother him, but he still cared enough to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And the way that it happens is really interesting, and that's kind of what we see in this next section here. So, Mom, would you read that for us?
Sure. These are verses 29 through 34. 29 through 34. And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that the power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see, the crowd is pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." So, Jacob, you pointed out that we have immediately in verse 29 and immediately in verse 30, which seems to be one of Mark's trademark words.
He uses it a lot.
Right.
Driving the action along,
right. Yeah. And I think this happened simultaneously. The very moment that she touched Jesus, that very moment she was healed, and that very moment he turned around. That's how quick it was. When God takes action, it happens immediately. It can happen immediately. And this is a part where Jesus didn't always, Jacob, you wrote, Jesus does this miracle without knowing about it, kind of is an example of how Jesus didn't completely use his powers as God, but he knew after it happened that he did, when he said he felt the power go out of him. Yeah, so it's kind of a strange thing where he's man and God at the same time, and how that kind of, oh yeah, how did that work?
What is that, like a cramp leaving? Like what is that phenomenon like?
We will never know.
We'll never know.
We'll never know. Yeah,
it's amazing, and that he knows that, and yeah, he said he calls her daughter, bringing her into God's family.
So
exactly.
This is interesting because you have where it talks about Jesus in Isaiah 53. Surely he has borne our infirmities. He takes, he's not only just taking it away from people, but he's taking it into himself too, to a certain extent. Jesus taking all of the brokenness of the world, and eventually he's going to take it all to the cross, right? And so Jesus is taking this in, and yeah, so he in his humiliation doesn't know who it is that touched him and how it is that this has happened. And so, he's puzzled even how this happened.
Yeah.
He's got to ask, who touched me? Who did that? Well, everybody's touching you, Jesus.
And he knew who it was. He did know who it was. But when he said, "Who was it?" it gives her the opportunity to share with the rest of the crowd how Jesus had blessed her, how Jesus had healed her. So she had a chance to say to Jesus and to everyone who was listening, for 12 years, I had this flow of blood, and I couldn't, no doctors would heal me. And I knew that if I just touched your garment, Jesus, that's all I had to do. Just touch your garment, you would heal me. And Jesus says, "That's right. That's right. Daughter, your faith has healed you." So the same way, when God heals us, when he works in our lives, God gives us the opportunity and the blessing to be able to share that story with others.
To confess the confidence that we've had in God, and then to declare how God has made good on the promises and what we've believed him for. So to say, yeah, we really are forgiven. Yeah, we really do have life. Here's what God has done for me, right? Your faith has made you well. She trusted, she believed. Yes, this will happen.
That doesn't mean that she gets credit for it happening, right?
No.
She's still the one who does all the healing there. That God was the one who brought her into the family, and because she's part of that family, she got the gifts of the family.
Let's go on. Let's see what happens here as the narrative continues.
Yeah, while he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, Jairus, of course, "Do not fear, only believe." Now, this is putting, I have 3 kids myself, a daughter who's 8, putting myself in Jairus' shoes, right? So there's a huge crowd, and you're trying to book it to get okay, Jesus finally came back across the lake, right? My daughter's sick, and Jesus isn't here anymore. What am I going to do? And then Jesus finally comes back. Okay, now let's go get him and bring him right away. And then there's a whole crowd in the way. And then some lady has the gall to get herself healed. Well, my daughter is sick, right? Mm-hmm. This lady's been sick for 12 years. She could have waited a few more minutes, thinking of putting myself in Jairus' shoes. And then he gets the news that she's dead. The reaction that people have when they find out, when they're not kind of a surprise that someone they love has died, is not. It's a heart-wrenching thing. And to get that news right there, oh man.
In front of Jesus, who could have helped, who should have helped, right? And so they say, why trouble the teacher any further? You thought he might help, but Jesus wasn't enough. It was too. Your problem was too big for Jesus, and that's what these guys say. I think is what a lot of people hear anyway from the world around us. Why do you do this? Why do you follow Jesus? Why do you think he can help you? Why do you go to church or this? What good has that done for you?
Yeah, what's in it for you? That point of view, what's in it for you? And Jesus right away says, "Do not fear, only believe." You can't imagine what Jairus and Mrs. Jairus, how they responded to that.
It's almost like Jesus doesn't give them a chance to respond.
Yeah.
Just boom, immediately overhearing it. And I love the word that's used there. The only other place where that word is used in the New Testament, it's for ignoring something. Mm-hmm. And so it could mean that Jesus, yeah, he hears it and completely ignores what they've said. And then, boom, here's what you've got to look at. Okay, what are you going to look at? What is your faith going to see? Are you going to see this horrible thing that's lying before you, or are you going to keep your eyes focused on me, Jairus? There are moments where, well, really, it's every day for us, where Jesus says, okay, you've got to do this same thing too. You have to focus not on what your eyes see, what you see before you, but on me and on the promises that I've made to you. That's what's real. That's what you got to cling to today.
Yeah, and you can imagine Jesus putting his arm around Jairus and saying, "Okay, let's go, Jairus." And the people who brought the message, "Oh, what? Did you hear it? She's dead." And the disciples are like, "Yeah, we heard you. She's dead."
Well, anyway,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Now, if we're following a chronology, kind of. As Mark is telling the story, Mark has not told us of any Jesus raising anybody yet. Luke, however, has told us that before this, Jesus raised this widow's son in Nain. So Jesus has raised people from the dead before. This is not a 100% new thing that Jesus is doing. And so, here we go. Jesus gives him that word, "Do not fear, only believe." Here we go.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens next, shall we? All right. So Jesus comes to Jairus' house, verses 37 to 40. And he, Jesus, allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion and people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he entered, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. All right. This is awesome, actually. Jesus has the worst funeral etiquette of anyone. Okay? we have funeral etiquette today. I mean, funerals in 21st century America are getting kind of weird a lot of times and stuff, but there's still etiquette. Okay. out here in the country, you see a hearse, you pull over to the side out of respect for the family. Jesus doesn't do that. He stops the whole thing with the widow's son at Nain and raises the guy right there. And, you stand in line to go through the viewing line, and you greet the family and things like that. And you honor and respect and you mourn with people. Jesus doesn't do that. He, yells at the people for, why are you guys making such a commotion and doing all of this mourning and weeping and wailing? And okay, so this is the opposite of the German communities that we're in, where people are very stoic a lot of times when someone dies. I mean, this was a very emotional culture where you make loud sounds and noises. Yeah. In fact, I think the word for wailing loudly is an onomatopoeia, alalazzo. So it's people going like that, where you see that in the Middle East or things, other places in the world, where people are, it is just kind of a commotion and things like that. And why are you doing this? She's not dead. She's sleeping. How wonderful is it that this is often the way that Scripture speaks about those who have died with faith, right? That they are just sleeping. You see it all the way back in one example I can think of is in Daniel, where it talks about the end of days, and he talks about those who sleep in the dust will rise. Paul does the same thing in 1 Thessalonians 4, where he talks about those who have fallen asleep as those who have died. Does it a number of other places too. And here's the beautiful thing. When you fall asleep in Jesus, you get to wake up.
Yeah.
You get to wake up. So we have the wonderful word of the hymn, the verse of the hymn. Lord, teach me to live that I may dread the grave as little as my bed.
So what hymn was that?
That is All Praise to Thee, My God, This Night. In LSB, that's hymn 883.
Oh, okay, very good.
And how do those lyrics go again?
That says, teach me to live that I may dread the grave as little as my bed. Teach me to die that so I may rise glorious at the awful day. What a great way for us to look at death as simply falling asleep in Christ and ready to wake with him as we are.
Another good hymn is God's Own Child, I Gladly Say It, which talks about how the grave has eyes wide open waiting for me, but I'm not afraid because I'll sleep securely.
There I sleep secure. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is another great Greek little thing from verse 40. When Jesus put them all outside, the word that is there, it's the same word that is used when Jesus casts out demons. Throw them out. So the word is ekbalo. It's where we get our word for ball. So Jesus throws these people out of the house because
where we get our word for what?
For ball.
Oh, okay. Like you throw a ball. Okay.
Throw a ball. To throw a ball, right.
To throw something out. Yeah. So
so you can, like you mentioned, the worst etiquette ever. So he's like, today he would be like clearing the funeral parlor.
Clearing the funeral home. Yeah.
Yeah. There's the huge line outside. Oh, get out!
Everybody out! Get out of here! Everybody, yeah. Or the other great funeral etiquette thing is when Jesus comes to Lazarus's grave and they're standing there in front of the grave and Jesus is like, "All right, open it up."
Yeah.
And Martha's like, "Well, he smells bad. He's been dead for 4 days."
When it says in verse 40 that they laughed at him. It reminded me of somebody else who laughed.
Yeah.
When Sarah laughed when she heard that her dead womb would produce a child, and so the mourners laugh when Jesus is about to restore life. What a wonderful joke that God pulls when he brings the dead to life. What a great joke. The joke's on you guys because God's got this.
There's a lot of laughter in the resurrection. There really is.
I read this is a different laugh than Sarah's. Like Sarah's was, oh, okay, yeah, sure, God, really, but this is like almost like a disdainful. What are you doing?
You're crazy.
Yeah.
This is a good reminder. This is what God's promise is. I mean, it is completely beyond what we imagine ourselves. right?
Mhm.
It does sound ridiculous. And Jesus is able to do far more than we can ask or imagine, Paul says in Ephesians. Let's go on. Let's finish this. Let's go on to the last verses here.
Okay. So taking her by the hand, he said to her, Talitha Kumi, which means, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl got up and began walking around, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. So again, we have two immediatelys right away. The very moment the little girl got up and began walking around, it was the same moment they were overcome with amazement. Talitha Kumi, little girl, I say to you, get up. And it seems kind of strange, like, this is great news. Why did Jesus say, don't tell anyone? Well, one of the reasons I think is because Jesus didn't want people coming to him saying, hey, my dad just died, or hey, my grandma died. Come make him come alive again. Because Jesus doesn't want us to be afraid of death. He wants to prepare us to die. Like you said, it's like when you die, you fall asleep, and when you wake up, you're in heaven. So that's better than anything.
Yeah, there were already too many people pressing around him to be healed. Now, imagine the guys lowering like a casket down through the ceiling instead of their friend. It's the focus. Jesus knows that he's there to do these things to show that he's the Son of God and that he's here to save us. But he's here to save us. He's not here to give us Band-Aids. He's here to heal the whole thing.
Because this little girl, got to grow up, but you know what? She died again.
Yeah.
She did. I mean, she's not still running around somewhere as a 2,000-year-old woman. She died again. She's with the Lord now, waiting for Jesus to come again to raise her again from the dead. I think there's some other cool things with this too. First of all, Talitha Kumi, that's interesting because it doesn't get translated. It's left there. We have the very Aramaic words that Jesus spoke. And why would this be that we have the exact words? I mean, probably most of the rest of the words that Jesus spoke throughout the Gospels were in Aramaic. Why these?
Because these are the words that give life. Just with the same power as when Jesus spoke, let there be light, and let the water be separated from the seas, to produce a firmament. Those are the words that give life.
And so, I mean, it must have made just such an impression on everybody who's there, right? Peter included, and we talked about this in the intro video, that it's probably Mark relaying a lot of what Peter experienced firsthand. And so Peter is one of the guys there is like, yeah, I mean, this is, that's what he said. I remember that. Boom. Clear as day.
And you guys say that to your daughters, right? When it's time for school, Talitha Kumi, right? Get up. Time to get up. Let's get going.
Sophie's good at getting up because
It was not bad either.
She wants Jesse to do her hair before Jesse goes to work. So she's complains that she doesn't wake up. I don't wake her up earlier.
Yeah.
The boys are the opposite.
The boys are the opposite. After you, huh, Paul?
Yeah.
It's also interesting that one of the commands that they give, or that Jesus gives, is give her something to eat. And so we remember that when Jesus rose Easter Sunday, one of the ways that he showed the disciples that, nope, I'm really alive, that this body that you really saw dead on the cross, it's alive again. Here's some fish. I'm going to eat this fish. It's not going to fall through me like a ghost. I'm really alive. And so to show them too, yeah, this girl is really, really, truly alive. Have her eat something.
Yeah, and I love that she began walking because she's 12 years old. That's what 12-year-olds do. She's not. She's just gonna get up and start doing stuff.
She's gonna, get up and run around.
Yeah, and as a parent, I think those parents must have been in such shock. And you said, okay, she's a normal girl again, and she probably hadn't eaten for a while since she was sick.
So she's
Right.
healthy too.
She's healthy. She needs some food. She's fine. Go eat. Let her eat. Give her some food.
Yeah, because everyone probably brought dishes over to their family, right?
Probably.
Probably. And
Yeah.
hey, now you got Jesus and the disciples there, so everybody's covered.
Funerals usually have better food than weddings too. So
Yeah. All right. So, Mom, you have taught this numbers of times to kids in Sunday school, in preschool, and in other classes. What are some things that, as you're teaching this, you really point out to the kids so that they really understand what's happening here at this account?
Okay. I talk to kids and I say, you've seen things that are dead, right? Like the worms that dry up on the sidewalk, or the bird, or the raccoon that got run over in the middle of the road, or the butterfly that's not flying anymore. You know what dead is, right? And there's a difference between something that's dead and something that's sleeping. You can tell the difference, right? And when the little girl was dead, her heart stopped beating. She was not breathing. Her body was cold. She was dead. She was really, really dead. And the doctors couldn't make her come alive again. Her mom and dad couldn't make her come alive again. No one could make her come alive again. But Jesus took her by the hand and said, Talitha Kumi, little girl, I said, you get up. And all of a sudden, her heart started beating again. She started breathing again. Her body got warm. She was alive, just like that. And I also say, God doesn't want you to be afraid to die. It's kind of like when you go to sleep. You close your eyes and you wake up and you're in heaven and you're with Jesus forever. And nobody dies in heaven. And nobody's sick in heaven. Everybody's happy in heaven. So we talk about that too. And the first prayer that I learned was, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. So I tell kids, if you die, you go to sleep, you'll be with Jesus, wake up in heaven. It'll be okay. You don't want kids to be afraid to go to sleep, but yeah. But it is a helpful prayer to say for helping kids understand that.
This is such an important thing, I think, for kids, and to have kids familiar with these accounts and narratives from the Gospels of Jesus either raising somebody from the dead, or Easter itself, Jesus rising from the dead. So that way, when a grandparent dies, or someone else they're very close to passes away, what's your frame of reference for thinking about death that you automatically can go back to? It's what Jesus did with death, right? It's Jesus raising people from the dead, Jesus rising from the dead himself. Like, I remember the night before Grandpa Miller's funeral. When that was the first for us as kids, the first person we'd really known well who passed away. And Dad took that time that night to tell us John chapter 11, Jesus raising Lazarus. And that, to this day, that is still one of the important memories of that time in my life. I was 10 for that to have happened, and for that word of God to be there for us in that time for us. So this is really important for our kids to know these well, and to know these promises that Jesus is making to us too. That so we're kind of in the middle of this story if we think about it in that way. We're kind of in that point right now where someone has died, and you hear this promise from Jesus: don't be afraid, just believe. And we know what's going to happen, that Jesus is going to come and Jesus is going to raise this person. But we're kind of in that meantime right now, where Jesus is calling us not to be afraid, but to simply just trust what he has said to us. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, he lives.
Right.
To hang on.
And you talked about the raising of Lazarus and the raising of the son of the widow. Okay. Those are two important men that were raised from the dead. But God cares about women, and he cares about little girls, and they are precious to him and worth his time, worth his worry, worth his love, worth his forgiveness.
Yeah, and we're pretty insulated from death in our culture today. In those days, a lot of kids didn't make it to adulthood. You know, and so and kids weren't valued the way they weren't treasured the way they are today because so many of them didn't make it to adulthood. So Jesus taking the time to care even one of these little ones, to care to raise her up, shows that everyone is loved and valued by Jesus.
The way Jesus talked about kids, the way Jesus treated kids, the way that Jesus commanded other people to respect and honor kids changed the way that Western civilization thought about children. Wow. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Paul, for being with us once again. And we will look forward, Mom, hopefully to having you again sometime.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much for having me.
Great. All right. Thank you. We'll see you later.